It was supposed to be a blitz, a decapitation strike, a televised walkthrough of Kyiv with flags and victory speeches. Instead, the world watched a superpower stumble into a long war that exposed its myths, hollowed its fleet, and bled its army, while a smaller neighbor rewrote modern warfare with ingenuity, grit, and an army of garage-built drones. 3 years on, the question is no longer why did Russia fail, but how many ways did it fail, and what has that failure become today? The images that framed the opening chapter are now part of the war's grammar. VDV helicopters spiraling over Hostomel, then fleeing empty-handed. The Ukrainian phrase, Russian warship, go, echoing from Snake Island. The pride of the Black Sea, the cruiser Moskva, slipping beneath the waves. These were not just viral moments. They were proof of a Russian campaign plan built on fantasy and executed by a military that believed its own propaganda. The original analysis nailed that story. Bad assumptions, brittle logistics, and a leadership cast terrified of telling the truth upward. That early pattern, overreach followed by improvisation, still shapes everything that came after.
Hostomel was the first broken promise. Russia failed to seize the airhead, failed to encircle Kyiv, and failed to crack a state it had convinced itself would fold by the weekend. Ukraine, moving faster than Russia's OODA loop, turned the outskirts of the capital into a killing field for armored columns and the infamous 40-mile convoy into a traffic jam sculpted by artillery and javelins. Those were the days when the Kremlin still called it a special military operation with a straight face. The original script captured the shock perfectly. The world's second army, proving it could be second at quite a lot. Then came the sea. Snake Island was a meme factory, yes, but it also was a rehearsal for something larger. A Ukrainian doctrine of pressure at range, from Neptune missiles to TB2s, to special operators with a talent for making Russian planners nervous. When the Moskva went down, it wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol, command dysfunction, false confidence, and air defenses that looked better on parade than under fire. The Black Sea chapter of Russia's embarrassment has only grown since, as we'll see. By summer 2022, another failure was clear. Russia could not win the sky. It could terrify cities with missiles and Shaheds, but it never achieved the air superiority necessary to erase Ukrainian artillery, maneuver, and rear area logistics. The Russian Air Force learned to stay at arm's length, lob standoff munitions, and avoid the Patriot bubbles that appeared over time. In a sentence, the VKS could punish but not dominate. That truth still applies today, even as Russia has found one particularly brutal workaround, glide bombs, which we'll revisit. Behind the battlefield was the rot. The original script walked through those foundations. A BTG structure, too top-down from modern combined arms, a culture that punished initiative, and a logistical system optimized for corruption, not high-tempo war. Commanders cycled, excuses multiplied, and the Kremlin resorted to mobilization, prisoners, and private armies to paper over a manpower crisis. These were not cracks, they were load-bearing faults. Now, let's bring the story up to date, because the war has changed shape, even if its basic physics haven't. In February 2024, Russia clawed out a costly battlefield victory by capturing Avdiivka. The town was ground into dust by months of firepower and a new Russian tactic, mass employment of guided glide bombs, especially Fab 500s and Fab 1500s. Released from relative sanctuary, Ukraine withdrew to save men, while Russia trumpeted a win that cost staggering amounts of ammunition and lives. Avdiivka mattered, operationally and politically, but it was not a strategic fix. It was a symptom of a war Russia can only advance in by eating the map, one crater at a time. Those glide bombs are the fiercest new wrinkle. In early 2024, Russia surged them, hundreds in a matter of days at times, obliterating trenches and strongpoints in Donetsk and hammering Kharkiv's region from across the border. They are blunt, devastating, and hard to stop without hunting the launch aircraft. In a dark irony, glide bombs exist because Russia never secured the sky. Instead, it invented a way to fake it from afar. The tactic helped Avdiivka fall, but it did not change the wider balance. Ukraine countered by hunting Su-34s and Su-35s and lobbied harder for F-16 and more Patriots. You could call glide bombs Russia's innovation by necessity, or just Plan B for an air force that can't get close. If the ground war became a meat grinder, the sea war turned into a lesson plan. Ukraine kept dismantling the Black Sea Fleet with cruise missiles, precision strikes, and most dramatically, explosive sea drones piloted from first-person view. In March 2024, naval drones hit the patrol ship Sergei Kotov near the Kerch Strait. Weeks earlier, they'd sent the landing ship Cesar Kunikov to the bottom. By that point, even British officials were saying the fleet had suffered a functional defeat in the Western Black Sea, forced to relocate key vessels from Sevastopol and increasingly unable to control shipping lanes. Modern history doesn't have many examples of a navy losing initiative to a country with almost no navy left. And yet, here we are. The payoff wasn't just sunk steel, it was economic. In 2023 to 2024, after Russia quit the UN grain deal, Ukraine opened its own nearshore corridor, hugging NATO coastlines and daring the fleet to stop them. It worked. By January 2024, exports via the corridor were beating the best months of the old agreement, and insurers, never known for their sense of adventure, found ways to underwrite the risk. That corridor kept Ukraine's economy alive and filled silos from Odessa to Chornomorsk, when many predicted a standstill. Score 1 for maritime asymmetric warfare and actuarial science. As Ukraine hit the Black Sea Fleet, it also reached further into occupied Crimea and Russia proper. In April 2024, Washington quietly delivered long-range ATACMS, and within days, Ukraine used them against a Crimean airfield. Proof that Russia's rear was no longer rear. Through 2024 and 2025, Ukrainian one-way attack drones and missiles pushed deeper, lighting refineries, airfields, and depots hundreds of kilometers from the border. Every plume over Ryazan or Volgograd carried a message. You can move your war's logistics out of artillery range, but not out of reach. That campaign didn't stop Russia's missiles, but it did disrupt fuel flows, raise costs, and pull air defenses back inside Russia, a tax on Moscow's way of war. Russia replied the way it knows best, by punishing the grid. In April 2024, a massive strike destroyed the Tripilska power plant outside Kyiv, one of the country's largest thermal stations. It was a winter preview: degrade electricity, stunt industry, and make civilian life harder. Ukraine's answer was point defense triage, saving cities when possible and moving generation into smaller, harder-to-target nodes, while pleading for more interceptors. Each winter since 2022 has been a duel between factory output and air defense magazines, and 2024 to 2025 is no exception. Foreign aid became the swing factor again in 2024. After months of US political limbo, Congress approved a $61 billion package in April, unlocking artillery shells, air defense missiles, and more HIMARS munitions. Europe followed its own track, a €50 billion Ukraine facility to keep the state running, and a Czech-led scramble to vacuum up 155mm and 122mm shells worldwide. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Logistics beats theatrics. The West hasn't always been fast, but when it is, the front line shifts measurably. Of course, Russia adapted too. It stabilized its war economy and shoved money into the furnace. For 2025, Moscow hiked defense spending to roughly 6.3% of GDP, about a third of federal outlays, while the rest of the budget got the haircut. It is a choice with consequences. Industry poached by mobilization, inflation pressure, and a fiscal future chained to oil prices and wartime production. You can finance a long war this way. You cannot do it forever without trading tomorrow for today. What about the front line itself in 2024 to 2025? Russia made incremental gains in Donetsk after Avdiivka, pushing west and squeezing villages along the Pokrovsk axis. Ukraine, for its part, introduced new complexity in August 2024 by launching a cross-border incursion into Russia's Kursk region, capturing dozens of settlements, and forcing the Kremlin to redeploy units to its own soil. That raid didn't end the war, but it stretched Russian lines, challenged the narrative of invulnerability, and bought Kyiv an operational lever at the bargaining table. It also reminded both publics that borders cut both ways. A dramatic subplot arrived in the air. F-16. After a year of pilot training and cloak and dagger base prep, the first jets arrived and began limited operations, joined by a modest number of French Mirage 2000s. Ukraine still can't conjure Western sortie rates or missile stockpiles, but even a handful of modern fighters complicates Russian planning and pushes the VKS higher and further out. Add Patriot ambushes and smarter seed dead tactics, and suddenly Russian glide bomb lanes aren't free fire zones. This isn't Hollywood. One jet does not a no-fly zone make, but it's a meaningful evolution with real costs for Russia. Casualties reveal the underlying logic. Western and Ukrainian estimates through mid-2025 put Russian killed and wounded spiraling toward or beyond the 7-figure mark. The exact numbers vary, and Moscow keeps them guarded, but the trend line is unmistakable. Russia pays for progress with bodies, and its way of fighting is designed to make that bill acceptable to the Kremlin, if not to the men at the front. Ukraine's losses are severe too. This is not a one-sided price, but the meat assault approach Russia embraced from Bakhmut to Avdiivka to Kupiansk has a strategic cost. It can take ground and still lose time. In a long war, time is a weapon. Let's circle back to the sea, because the Black Sea is where Russia's early failures matured into a genuine strategic problem. By 2024, the fleet's inability to defend Sevastopol or operate confidently west of Crimea ceded initiative to Ukrainian drones and missiles. Every successful drone run, Sergei Kotov, Caesar Kunikov, was more than a sunk cost. It was a vote of no confidence in Russian layered defenses. The functional defeat label stuck because shipping patterns and basing changes proved it. A navy that can't protect home waters can't blockade a neighbor. A grain corridor existed, not because Russia allowed it, but because the fleet could no longer stop it. That's an astonishing sentence to write. Meanwhile, Ukraine's long-range strike ecosystem matured. ATACMS punished airfields. Home-built drones harassed refineries. Special operations and partisans mapped radars and depots. It became a permanent campaign, calibrated to erode Russia's ability to project force, and it forced Moscow into awkward choices: protect Belgorod or Bryansk, or protect Crimea, shield refineries, or shield bridges. Any answer weakens something else. This is what modern offset looks like when you can't outproduce your adversary in missiles or aircraft. You out-invent them in problem sets. If you want one sentence that connects 2022 to 2025, it's this: Russia still has not solved the problem it revealed on day one: how to turn tactical violence into strategic success. It can shatter a city block with a 1.5-ton glide bomb, but it cannot make Ukraine surrender. It can capture Avdiivka, but it cannot stop Ukrainian missiles from hitting Crimea. It can spend 6% of GDP on defense, but it cannot spend its way into a competent NCO corps or honest logistics. Those are software problems with hardware consequences. There are counter-arguments worth acknowledging. Russia has learned. Its EW is meaner, its Lancets bite deeper, its glide bombs are a real edge, its industrial base is churning ammunition. It has found a way to advance without maneuver, by substituting explosives for doctrine. And Ukraine faces real constraints: manpower limits, air defense magazine depth, training cycles, and the politics of Western stockpiles. This is why we see a front that feels both static and lethal, like a chessboard unchanged for weeks, while pieces are destroyed off the board. And yet, strategically, the war keeps drifting away from Moscow's original aims. Ukraine is still a sovereign state, aligned with the West, armed by NATO, and increasingly integrated into Europe's defense economy. The Black Sea, once a Russian lake, is now a contested battle space, where cheap Ukrainian drones have veto power. The Kremlin has consolidated territory in the east and south, but it has also consolidated its dependence on a war economy. and a narrative that can't afford reality. That is not a path to victory. It is a path to forever. Calling the Black Sea Fleet functionally defeated is like saying your car is functionally fine after the wheels moved to Novorossiysk and Russia named its glide bombs smart, but most of their intelligence is in gravity. When Ukraine rang the doorbell in the Kursk region, Moscow learned that good fences make good neighbors, and bad air defenses make bad mornings. Humor aside, every quip is paid for in blood. This channel never forgets that. So what comes next? Expect the glide bomb era to meet a steadier stream of Patriots, F-16 operations expanding, and more creative Ukrainian strikes that drag the war deeper into Russia's rear. Expect Europe's shell pipeline to matter more than speeches. Expect the Black Sea to keep teaching admirals new nightmares. And expect the central paradox to hold. Russia can devastate, but it cannot decide. Ukraine can survive, but it must constantly innovate to thrive. In 2022, Russia failed fast. In 2023 to 2025, it failed slowly. Both rhythms produced the same outcome: a war Moscow can prolong, but not win on the terms it set. The question that remains, for Kyiv, for Moscow, for everyone watching, is simple and brutal. When a great power learns that firepower cannot replace strategy, does it change the strategy or just buy more fire? And how many winters will it take before the answer changes the war?